Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the City of Farmers Branch study session for Tuesday, September 5th. Our first item is A1, discuss regular agenda items. Councilman Merritt?
Thank you, Mayor. There's quite a few things on the consent agenda this time around, and so if I may walk through that, others may have questions in similar veins, so. I find it interesting that we're going to have a discussion in the study session regarding the naming.
Which item?
This will be H5, the potential renaming or amending the event center name, but it's on the consent agenda. It's the idea that we're working in a study session and then,
Yes, the idea is we have spent a decent amount of time on this one, so council willing that we create an avenue to where if a name is agreed upon by council when it comes time with consent, they'll call it with the name in there.
all right, it's an interesting approach. All right, thank you. Item H6, I'd like to thank Ben and Joaria for addressing this, but this is related to the environmental health inspections. I wanted to make it clear to the residents, this is a contract that we've had for several years preceding this. So this is not a new contract. However, it does appear that there'll be new services included in this particular iteration of the contract. Is that correct, Ben?
That is correct.
Thank you very much. Let's see. Moving on. I'd like to point out on item H8, regarding amending Chapter 82 of the Code and Ordinances, Civil Adjudication. This is really for those that are watching. This is the new public service officer position that we have, allowing that individual or those individuals, because we're going to have more than one, to be able to write tickets. Is that correct?
Parking tickets, and it's to keep the police officers focused on
Parking
speeding and
tickets.
moving violations, yes.
Parking tickets. Okay, thank you very much. All right. And then on item H9, I know we were all presented an updated list, redlined set of the ordinances. I'd be interested in seeing if we might be able to move that, if we have an opportunity for discussion of that in this particular format. So that would be a request that I have, that we take that off the consent agenda in order, and perhaps even delay it till the next time, the next meeting, in order to allow not only the council, but the public to understand the changes that are being forecasted.
Is it possible to extend it
Mic, or these are too loud?
We can, the only issue is if there were to be,
Changes,
stand up first.
any
Tammy
changes.
Zimmerman, Director of Finance. If there were to be changes, that has been involved in the budget, that could delay our budget approval process.
Fair enough. That's a fair assessment. I just think it's interesting. I'd like us to go over that at some point, Mayor, that we could go.
So I think the request is reasonable. I think it would be helpful if we just saw it, just so we see that there are no glaring anomalies in the proposed fees. I'm anticipating that this will not anticipate the holding up the budget in any way, but is that easy enough to provide that information?
Definitely put it on the next
Very
city
good.
council agenda.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. And then on, I think the others were just cleanups that we talked about, Ben, so I won't go into those. Again, thank you and the staff for those. And then on item J2 this evening, which is the regular agenda item for the waste fees, I want to make it clear in reading this that this is effective for October of 24, not of this October.
That is correct.
Okay, so we want to make sure that the public knows that that's a full year out. Then the rest I'll be able to address in regular session. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor Lynn, may I make one point of clarification? On Appendix A, is it being removed from consent, or is it being discussed at the next meeting, or is it being left on consent and also being discussed at the next meeting? I just wanted to clarify.
Well, I would think that we leave it on consent. However, the information provided should just serve as a backup. Again, barring anything that's just glaring. If it makes better sense at this point to remove it from consent and hold it till the next meeting, I'm fine with that if staff is good.
It works for us. We do have this red line pulled out, and so we can display that downstairs if we want to talk through it tonight as well.
I'd be
All
comfortable
right,
with that.
let's, if we can, let's do it tonight and just walk through
I
it, and that
prefer
way,
to lock as much of the budget down as I can.
Yeah.
Okay.
okay. So,
Comfortable with that. Thank you, Mayor.
so that item,
H9.
H9 will be discussed as J4. Okay, good?
I'm good. Thank
All
you.
right. Councilman Jackson?
Just a couple of questions, Mayor. On item H2, the Atmos City Steering Committee, I had a question regarding one of the years in the attachment where it presented the prior RRM filings. 2020 was abnormally high compared to all other years, and I was just curious what, it went from 54 million to 136 million to 40 million requested, and I just wondered what the jump was.
I have somebody that can answer that.
Yes. Good afternoon. I'd be happy to speak with that. Jan Rugg, Atmos Energy Manager of Public Affairs.
Hi, Jan.
Hi, Jan. How are you?
Good.
Our years, every year with the RM filing, the filing amount is reflective of capital spend for our infrastructure. And your question is one I do get regularly, and it has to do with particular projects throughout the year. Another thing that we are seeing right now is higher cost in our projects. So a higher dollar amount may or may not be reflective of more projects. It's just, it costs us more to do those projects.
Right, understood. So would that 2020 be reflective of, let's say, big replacement projects, line replacements, or?
Generally so, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, excellent. Thank you, Jan.
You're welcome.
Councilman, if I could, I'll follow up right here and ask Jan if she can tell us on average about how much will residential gas service increase?
Absolutely. So with this year's filing and upon the negotiated amount, what residential customers will see as an increase will be $6.47. And commercial, and that's your smaller businesses, they're going to see an increase of $24.72.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Richard.
Okay, on item H6 regarding the Bradley Tucker inspection contract. In the news recently, there was, I think it was Arlington's pools and splash pads were all closed down because of some kind of bacteria. This company does the inspection of our frog pond to that level to determine those kinds of things.
Well, the Arlington situation was very unique. It was a pilot federal program that was apparently looking for the amoeba. So on this case, I'll let Shane turn it over to him for more specifics on how we approach it. But the permitting and inspection of the pools every year is this, my understanding is what this person will be helping with. Oh, Shane.
My name is Liz Arts, and I'm the health manager. Our inspector, Bradley, he's the one that does the inspections of the pool that you're referencing to. And the pool came out, I mean, the results were fine for this year. So no negative or, positives, no positives results on the amoeba.
Okay, yeah. I would hope it was all positive. We'd have heard about it by now.
Yeah.
But same company does that kind of testing is what I'm really want to make sure.
The same company, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Item H10. So I remember this conversation last year about the municipal court judges. So I'm going to make sure I understand this item today. There was a comp increase given, but it didn't make it into the ordinance, and so now we're having to get it into the ordinance and go back and understand if,
I believe that is close to being how I understand it as well, as this is cleanup, making sure the processes are followed. Action comes out of executive session where the judges are evaluated and making sure we follow through on that action. Also cleaning up how the compensation is explained as well for working day, non-working day, and how we pay and what we pay in those instances. Did I miss anything on that one? Nope. Okay.
right? Okay, all right. That's all. Thank you, Mayor.
You bet. Councilman Beard?
On item H12, did we take multiple bids for that? Or receive multiple bids?
We did not. Mark Samuels, Director of Innovation and Technology. We're buying this off of purchasing cooperative so that we're not required to take multiple bids. It's a pre-bid contract price.
Okay. So how do you know if that's a good bid or not?
Well, so this is the same purchasing cooperative other cities and school districts purchase off of. They are vetted, and they have to compete to get on the purchasing cooperative.
They actually bid it out.
Correct. It's
They
pre-bid.
bid it out.
Yeah.
The cooperatives go out and they bid the services, and then,
So for this exact job?
yeah, for this type of service, yes.
Okay.
So it has been
So it has
competitive.
been bid.
So while we didn't do it, the agency did, so you should, now whether that's a good price in the private sector or not, it remains to be seen, but
Right.
it has met the requirements for being competitively bid.
Okay. So you feel confident that with who's doing the work and that the price, is the bid, is this the lowest bid we got? Is this the highest bid? Do we know?
This is a unique situation. So this particular vendor, we chose this vendor to do a design build with us on this one. So they actually designed the solution, working with the parks folks, with the IT folks, with us. So they designed it and engineered it at no cost to us. So that's what we call a design-build relationship, and we use that frequently on these AV projects, because the alternative is to go out and hire an AV engineer to write the specs and then bid the specs. And on these smaller projects like this, it's actually more cost-effective if you have a good vendor that you trust to just partner with that vendor to do a design-build. You get a much better product at a better price, because you're not paying for that engineering service, and then the staff hours and all the process of going out to bid, vetting the bids, vetting the vendors, et cetera, et cetera. So on these smaller ones especially, we tend to do a design build with the vendor. So they provided that at no cost.
All right, thank you.
I'll chime in and just say, just as a point of reference, the 35 project out here that's being done, the 35 widening is a design build project with Lone Star Constructors and the state. That was a set amount specified to do it. So, and they have a time limit, December 2025 to be finished. So cost overruns, it's on them.
Right.
Okay. More questions?
No, that's
Oh, okay. Councilman Roomer.
So I have a question about H11, the investment policy statement or summary policy. It's going to be very strange talking to you as I'm not facing you.
I'll come to your side.
So I've sent you quite a bit of questions. I just want to make sure we can go through those in the public. So can you talk to me a little bit about who exactly is managing our assets and how that works?
So we follow the Texas Public Investment Act, and we have an investment committee that is made up of our treasury manager, who is Mark Woodward. It's right here. We have our city manager. We have his substitute, which is Mike Mashburn, and we have myself and the deputy finance director, Corvo Tavera as our investment committee, where we meet regularly quarterly, but we will also meet when needed for investment strategy. So we internally have our investment committee do the investment strategic plan.
Okay.
Now,
So,
when we go out to debt, we do utilize Hilltop Securities as our financial advisory service.
but in the process of managing and administering the assets, which I think you said were about 141 million, there's no outside firm that we are paying to provide professional advice or management of the assets. That's managed in-house.
Correct.
Okay.
And we follow those guidelines that are by the PFIA, Public Finance Investment Act. And our main goal, our first priority is the stable security of those funds. So we are very limited and we are risk averse with sticking to treasury notes, treasury bills, munis. We've got some very good CDs that are bundled together. So, and then our second priority would be the liquidity. We are on a daily basis, we're monitoring our cash flow if it's needed for an upcoming large construction project that needs to be paid. We're looking at investments when they mature, getting a good yield and a safe investment.
Yeah, and I remember reading how you guys use multiple strategies to kind of ladder your different fixed income securities to make sure that they mature at the right time in alignment with upcoming projects and cash flow needs, right?
Correct.
Okay. So I guess one of the things that I'm interested in learning more about is the investment policy or the investment, the portfolio management strategy that you guys selected. I think you selected the active investment management philosophy. And so I was curious as to why.
So in the investment policy, I think you're referring to the active portfolio management, correct? And that is where it reads, the city shall pursue an active versus a passive portfolio management philosophy. And that basically means that as securities are sold, we're looking, typically we will go to the maturity. We don't want to take a loss. We will look if there's a benefit to doing that, if it's a callable security, or if there is something that has come up liquidity-wise that we would need to sell in advance of maturity. But passive typically will mean that we're using a third-party service for our investment advisory services, and we are actually doing that in-house and on an active daily basis. So that's why we chose the active philosophy.
Okay. So it's no secret that I'm a certified financial planner and
Correct.
work in this
These were
industry.
very good questions.
And so one of the concerns I have is just a professional looking into this. When you say you're actively managing a portfolio versus a passively managed portfolio, those are incredibly different distinctions. It doesn't mean that you have to 100% be one and 100% be the other. There's usually very minimal crossover. So if you're a passive investor, doesn't mean you can't sell out of something if you have a specific cash flow need, or if there are headlines coming where it is incredibly obvious to anybody out there that there's going to be a sector of the market that's not going to be doing well, you can shift over. That's usually a conversation you have with an investment committee or with clients. But from what you've described, your description of our investment philosophy doesn't align with what is stated on here. So my concern is, let's say 20 years down the road, you decide to finally retire and you're no longer here working 100-hour weeks. And so somebody else comes along and interprets this in the same manner that I am interpreting it, which is active management is usually one that you are paying a higher cost because the person who is administering your investments, it has to allocate more resources to be able to adequately predict the market and make investment decisions based off of what they think the market will do. Over time, through academic research, it's shown that that doesn't work. Sometimes they do much better, but it's only for maybe a year. It's not a consistent result. That's why passive investors typically tend to outperform active investors. And so, hence my philosophy that and to tell you how big of a difference active versus passive is, when in the industry, when you go work for a firm, one of the things you have to look at is to make sure that if you're going to work at a firm, that the investment philosophy aligns with your investment philosophy, because it is a firm by firm decision. So my firm, which manages about 80 billion assets under management, we will not work with clients whose investment philosophy is active, because we are passive investors. So it is a firm by firm decision. So it's a pretty big deal. So when I saw this and read your answers to my questions and also reviewed the rest of the investment policy statement, I was like, something's not matching. So if we're not actively looking for the next best opportunity and allocating significant resources, then we're not actually doing what one would in the investment industry consider active portfolio management. We would be probably more so considered passively portfolio management, portfolio managers. So that's my holdup there.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce Mark, and he can tell you a little bit about the active philosophy that we've chosen and how that, by switching to a passive philosophy, that may hamstring us a little bit in dealing with our portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to speak a little bit more about it.
Mark Woodward, Treasury Manager. As she said, we do, I think, is on an active basis because every day we make investment decisions. I do. I do a daily cash flow analysis. I determine how much cash we're going to need for that day, and what is left goes into our textbook. It's basically a sweep account. When we get to a point where we know, hey, we've got an extra $1 million that won't be needed for 6 months or so, that's when we call an investment committee meeting, or we decide between us and the city manager's office, hey, let's invest in something longer term. And we also analyze the portfolio, being treasury, agencies, SIDRs, municipals, which is best for our future, and which balances the portfolio too. And then I will go out and actively look for my brokers and see what the best deal is and go with that. So it is a daily investment procedure that we go through.
So are you on a daily basis, are you actively looking for what is the next best opportunity and selling out of what we currently hold to get into that?
We do not sell.
And that's my holdup, because an active investor would say, I'm looking for the next best opportunity. And a passive investor would say, we're just going to let it ride. If there are cash flow needs, then we will implement either a barbell or some kind of ladder strategy, and we will align when the CD or whenever the fixed income security is going to mature, right? So that, and I do the same thing. I look at cash flows. I make sure that we can get paid, right? So we billing, cash flow needs for client for annual or monthly distribution. So I look at all of those things, but I'm not actively going there saying, what do my clients currently hold? What's not doing well? What might need to change? And let me go ahead and make that change right now. That would be, for me, an active investor. Now, you could be active in doing work for an account, but I think that's what you guys are describing. You're active in it. You're just
We're
not
actively
setting
passive.
it. You're not just setting it and forgetting about it and looking at it once a quarter. Your eyes on it are constant,
Daily.
but the activity in terms of trading or looking for different securities is not active.
The difference with us is through the Public Funds and Investment Act, we are very limited at what we can look at. Once again, you probably look at commercial paper. I can't. So when we start looking out for that, our whole store shrinks. We have gone out and sold securities, but in the 22 years I've been here, we've only done it 3 times, and once was when they flew planes into a building. That's really, it has to be an emergency type situation for us to do that. But we do check, and, right now, with the market the way it is, would not sell because we just take a loss. So hold to maturity, and that's why we go through the cash flow on a daily basis. What do we need? When do we need it? Make sure that there's either maturity or the tax pool is a repurchase agreement. So I've got daily access to it. And actually, the tax pool is doing the best. So it's a daily decision.
Mhm. I think from what I've heard, I would feel more comfortable with it reading something more consistent with the industry guidelines that I'd be familiar with and comfortable with, just because, if someone here comes in to do your job or your job years later down the road and they don't understand that when you say active portfolio management, it means that you're just very active in making sure we have enough funds and not actively investing, then
We do look at different securities too, and that's how we're one of the few cities that gets into municipal bonds. A lot of the other cities stick to treasuries and agencies, and that's it, because that's traded at the Fed level versus munis where you go to the clearinghouse. CDRs, a lot of them don't mess with CDRs because it's just too hard to find a broker that's into it. So that is balancing our portfolio, making sure we're invested in the right things at the right time. So it's more than just cash flow, but cash flow is a big part of it.
So if I'm reading, and we can talk finance all day, I love it. Where we have this on the active portfolio management, and where we say the city shall pursue an active versus a passive portfolio management philosophy, that is, securities may be sold before they mature if market conditions present an opportunity for the city to benefit from the trade, or the investment officer will routinely monitor the contents of the portfolio, the available markets, and the relative value of competing instruments, and will adjust the portfolio accordingly. So in swapping it out and saying a passive portfolio management philosophy, would that allow us for selling of a security before the maturity? That's, I guess, where we're splitting a little bit of terminology. I come from the tax side as well, so passive means a whole different realm, and it's kind of a hands-off management. So that's where we could come up with a better term.
yeah, I think you can accomplish the same things that you're doing as you've described and as what's written on there. I just feel more comfortable if it be more closely aligned with what and I think I did a search yesterday. I said, is there actual confusion about the difference between an active and passive portfolio manager? And so I looked it up, and a very simple Google search reveals exactly the same thing as what I've described. So again, even if a layperson came along and didn't have any finance experience, but were experienced enough to work their way up to the ranks, I want to make sure that if they did a simple Google search, they're not misinterpreting exactly what we're saying in our document versus what we actually want to practice.
Okay, so if I'm hearing correctly, we could go forward if we strike out passive, pursue an active portfolio management philosophy, take out the word passive?
Opposite.
Question.
The city shall pursue a passive versus active portfolio management philosophy.
Okay.
Councilman, I have a question.
Yes.
So I'm reading in the investment policy under objectives, the city shall maintain a comprehensive cash management program. Now, cash could be considered all assets or comprehensive asset management program. I know from hearing this previously our philosophy is buy and hold. Typically, that's what we do. Safest thing to do. Okay. And so I understand what you're saying, but I'm concerned. I just don't want to tie somebody's hands if they have the need to
It
make.
doesn't.
Okay.
We do it all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so.
There's always, you're never purely active and you're never purely passive. You usually try to align yourself with what you are mostly. And if your
Sure.
policy is to buy and hold, unless you need to actually sell, I'm not going to go to a client and say, I'm sorry, you are a passive investor and you cannot access your money for a boat. I would be fired.
Yeah.
So we find ways to sell if there's an actual cash flow need.
Okay. All right. I was just trying to think, is there other than active or passive and getting locked into those two choices, is there a third that might be?
Someone creates it.
Or additional.
Well,
language.
that's where,
Or additional language. And
I don't know. I just wanted to pose that. I'll go back to being quiet.
Yeah, I mean, usually there's two. I suppose you can kind of create your own, but usually if you create your own, you have to be very, very specific about what you do, what you don't do, because you're creating something new. Passive versus active, you've already have investment gurus who have blessed both of them. There's pluses and minuses for them. There's industry knowledge associated with, if you select this is how you traditionally do this. If you select that, this is how you traditionally do this. So you would lose that, and it would. I would not recommend a customized approach. It's not really heard of in the industry.
Okay. But,
Is
So you'd just be making one up.
well, I was just going by what was stated here. But I'm just saying, I don't want to hamstring them in them doing their job to manage our assets. And so I'm not sure.
So I'm going to read to you. I just looked up on Investopedia. What is an active manager? Active management requires frequent buying and selling in an effort to outperform a specific benchmark or index.
Would that, I'm going to say, wouldn't that primarily refer to the general market? The city is not the general market because they have so many restrictions on what they can and can't do. We won't invest in stocks. We're not an equity investor.
If you're investing any fund.
I don't.
Mark, looks like Mark has
Yeah.
a
And if I
point.
may, we actually do that on a daily basis. We're just limited to text pool.
Okay.
Text pool does go into treasuries, agencies, things like that, and they change on a daily basis too. But we do investments on a daily basis, and we buy and sell from text pool, but those are investments.
I heard you say we buy and hold, and I heard somebody over here say we buy and hold. That is not what I just read.
Our security,
But
I'm
he
sorry,
just
our
said also that they
treasury and
they do trade a certain
investments.
portion of our assets on a daily basis. Did you not?
So
Okay.
you're trading them on an active basis, looking for what the next best opportunity is, regardless of whether we have cash flow needs or not?
Number one is cash, actually, number two is cash flow. Number one is secure, safe one. Number two is liquidity. And yes, we are, once again, on a daily basis, I do trades with text pool. Now, they are in different markets. They change on a daily basis too, especially with their weighted average maturity. And then we will also examine, once we get to a certain level, if we get $1 million we don't need for 6 months, let's look at SIDARs, let's look at municipal bonds, let's look at agencies. So that, way, once again, our scope is very limited versus what I think they're referring to.
So when you say you actively trade, is that only what you have? Is that a small percentage, or are you trading a majority of it on a daily basis?
This morning I transferred 500,000.
Out of 162 million?
Yes.
Okay.
And before that, we can only transfer 10 million at a time, and I have done that probably on a monthly basis.
Okay. Is there a way you can get me your transaction ledger showing what trades you've placed in the last, since year to date?
Including tax pool?
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you.
But I'm not ready to vote on it until I see that information. Because I really would like to see, it's a huge distinction in the industry.
Okay. So it is your desire to table this item?
Is it going to affect anything in the budget?
No, we can bring this back.
Okay.
Well, we have to do this every year, update the policy.
And what deadline do we have for that?
I do it every fiscal year, so.
We'll have it,
Guys with the budget.
By the next
we'll
meeting?
take action at the
Right.
next meeting.
Okay. So if I can get your blotter history, then it would be good.
Councilman, can I ask a question? Is your difference the fact that they have active versus passive in the policy? And/or is it the fact that we don't have a third party?
It's not the third party.
Okay. So if we change that to passive policy as opposed to passive policy versus active, you would be okay?
And we could still sell in an emergency.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens all the time, but I just,
That would be basically just change a couple of words in this.
One of the questions I had, Tammy and Mark, if I may, is the definition of passive and active in this case, in this document, coming from the oversight entity, if you will? I mean, are they providing the definition, or are we providing the definition of active and passive?
We had submitted the investment policy to the government treasurers of Texas, who actually teaches the Public Funds Investment Act, and they have certified it in the past. We have not done that, so it may have come from them, or it's always been that way since I've been director.
It's been that way
But it
since,
had, that phrase
I think
has been
that's where-
certified.
if I may, I think that's where you're coming from as well, that it's been active.
I can see both. And I understand your need for clarification. So at this point, let's just table this till Councilman get his information from you. We will mark it for action at the next meeting.
Mayor, if I may, just, it might be good to know what maybe a few other cities who follow the same procedures, how they characterize their practice.
So I'm hearing that investment policies from other municipalities and their wording on their portfolio management.
That operate the same as we do.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
I
I
have
do.
more questions.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm just kidding.
Oh. Well, I have two things. The first item is on H4, and I will ask my good friend Shane here. This has to do with EV charging. And, I'm sorry, Alex will answer. Okay. And the $5 overstay, does that kick in as soon as, once the vehicle is charged? Let's say it takes an hour. I don't know. Would that kick in at 61 minutes into the charging cycle? Or how does that, once you reach 100%, when does that $5 overcharge or overstay provision or fee kick in?
Yes, Alex Formica, Sustainability Manager. The overstay fee will happen once that charge hits, when your battery hits full charge. You'll receive a notification saying that it's time for you to move your vehicle along. You'll have a 1 hour grace period before that $5 per hour charge. So if you move it 59 minutes after that battery's been fully charged, you're good. If you wait an hour and 1 minute, you've accrued an overstay charge of $5.
Thank you.
You don't want you have to run out of one of our restaurants to go move your car. Once you allow you to finish your dinner.
Okay.
$5 seems way low still.
We've,
Did we decide that last time?
Yeah, it's in line with what other cities are.
It's in line, it's industry-wide, that's fairly flexible in that, but it's in that range.
And considering that one charger can only consume $3.28 per day, car could sit there for 24 hours, consume $3.28. If they stay over more than an hour, it's a $5 charge. It's not talking a lot of money, it's more principle.
It's more principle, and as Alex alluded to, notification is coming to the driver or the car's owner that their car is charged. And so giving them a grace period, it's simply promoting best practice to move your car along.
Thank you. My second is in regards to H8. I'm not sure if this is for the chief or you, Ben, but will the public safety enforcement officer be able to write citations for vehicles that are parking on grass or, yards in residential areas? Because that is a code violation.
Kevin McCoy, Chief of Police. So code stays with code, we stay with the public stuff. So fire lanes, fire hydrants, handicap spaces, code enforcement stays on top of code enforcement. They're separate from us.
Okay. We have an issue in some isolated areas of the city where people insist on parking on yards. Our ordinances do not allow for that. Somebody has got to be able to take action to enforce what our ordinances are. So I'll let you two figure that out, but it needs to be addressed. And I don't want us as a body to get upset with the new public service officer, say, you're not doing your job. So let's figure out if they have authority to cite that instead of waiting for a weekday when all code people are working.
We'll talk about it.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead. All right. Moving on to A2, discuss the proposed fiscal year budget, 23-24 budget, balanced budget, and proposed current year amended budget.
She's going to be zooming in when she's available.
Just assume I believe.
Mayor, Council, Tammy Zimmerman, Director of Finance. So you've seen me several times. We've met several times to discuss the budget. And tonight's discussion and the study session, it's mainly to kind of go over our town hall that we had last week. And we're going to have a agenda item downstairs on the public hearing for the budget, and that's scheduled tonight. So I wanted to get some input or feedback on some of the slides that we want to present to the public at 6 p.m. tonight. So we have several slides that we enlarged for our town hall. And you've seen several of them. You had great discussions with our residents in regards to these slides. So I wanted to kind of get an idea of what I should present at our public hearing tonight. We will present the video first thing. So I wanted to kind of go through each of these slides and feel out which ones we want to present to the public. This one I felt was a great one, and showing all the services that are provided for the relative minor cost of $77 for our seniors in comparison to $165 per month for our Medicare Part B. Our residents would be at $124, and that's based on an average household valuation. The dollar bill is always a great one to present, and showing that about 50% or half of your tax dollar goes to the school district. And then a quarter is for the City of Farmers Branch. We also, and this was revised somewhat so that you could hopefully read it. We did take into consideration your comments on the font size, and we've tried to increase it without losing the information. The main portion of this slide is that we have significant savings for our seniors with our 2-cent property tax reduction for the City of Farmers Branch. And then there is also the school district, which is increasing their homestead exemption from $40,000 to $100,000 and a tax rate decrease of 0.107. We also have increased exemptions for Dallas College and Parkland Hospital. And along those same lines, here's some different valuations of homes and what the savings would be depending on if you have a homestead exemption or a senior disabled exemption or no exemption. I thought I moved this to the end. That's one that was explained at the town hall on our general fund accounting and how that relates to our budgeting. This one, I couldn't increase the font size, but we did enlarge and have the printouts that we'll provide in here in this room, and we'll have them downstairs in the room below. And it shows the different comparisons to different cities. And we've already kind of discussed how you can't just look at the tax rate. There's exemption differentials on different cities. We've included a wide array of comparable cities. And so you can have those discussions. This is a new slide, and that's showing our low cost of employee salaries for the total in comparison to the general fund budget. It represents 53.9%. And if you look at the other municipalities, Richardson, Capel, Carrollton, Frisco, or Addison, we are quite low. And for 1 cent of property tax, that equates to $941,000. And for a cent for a homeowner, if we were to increase by 1 penny, it would cost $30 more on an annual basis. So I pushed all the other slides that you've seen several times to the end and trying to get some feedback on what we would like to present down below, downstairs in the regular council agenda item. Fund transfers, grant fund, our budget philosophy on fund balance, revenue stabilization fund, advanced funding, and then we have our pie charts on where the general fund revenue sources go, where we have our expenditures split out by the different departments, the majority of our revenue or our expenses, where that is all. You can see public safety is the majority of our spending, and that's the end of that. So I'm going to open it up for comments, feedback, suggestions.
Yep. Thank you, Tammy. I did get a lot of comments, positive comments from people who attended the budget town hall, and they were very impressed with the video, but they also enjoyed looking at the slides that we had throughout the room. So if we don't have them displayed tonight for anybody who comes to City Hall, we might want to put some of them up downstairs if we can execute that easy enough.
Okay.
Councilman Roman, do you have any comments?
Yes. Thank you for the presentation, and yeah, I had a lot of great feedback as well from the town hall. I'm fine with the budget as it is. The only thing I still am a little held up on is the media specialist position, but other than that, I'm fine with everything else, but it's certainly nothing that's substantial enough to have me vote against it. So thanks for everything that you've done, and for all the hours that you've put in.
Thank you. Any suggestions on the order of slides that we present tonight?
Go ahead, sir.
Tammy, if you go back to the beginning, you started with the, I guess it's the shopping baskets.
Yes.
I would suggest that we use the dollar bill first. And where
Okay.
the dollar, I mean, you can then talk to that particular point, that ordering is ever so mindful. But when we talk about how that tax bill lays out, I think that's a great one to start with.
Okay, perfect.
I agree. Start with that, because we're just a small piece of that.
That's right.
Councilman Jackson?
Thank you, Tammy. I like the dollar bill slide too. Everybody does. That's the big winner. There are a few slides here that really stand out to me that drive the result of this year's budget home, I think, for residents. If we could go to the, well, one is the comparison against Medicare Part B will be very helpful, particularly for our seniors. If we go to the one that has those three little blocks there, the
Okay.
comparison. Yes, that. This slide in particular, I think, really has a big message. If we look at the average home price of $380,531, for me, the average homesteader, not a senior, I'm going to see an $1,152 decrease in my taxes this year, right?
Correct.
For seniors, it's $1,188. For no exemption, $614. And I think that these three price points represent our community well and really help residents to understand what to expect from tax relief. I also believe that this slide very well exemplifies that the city can't make an impact alone.
Correct.
As great as it sounds to have the lowest tax rate, or the biggest tax rate reduction in 40 years, our piece doesn't amount to much, but we're in the game. And with all of the entities and the exemptions and the reductions, I think this slide right here tells that story very, very well. And so I would suggest that we kind of hang out here for a little bit and let people digest this.
Okay. It's a good suggestion. And I will always kind of asterisk this is estimated. There are some
Right.
lawsuits out there for
Understood.
school district.
I wouldn't go into revenue stabilization fund.
Okay.
How does Farmers Branch compare with all the other cities in the spreadsheet? That's kind of hard to read.
We will have those available.
I don't think we had to spend a lot of time there, but again, tell the story of that and encourage people to pick one up and take it home.
Okay.
Because once they take it home and they compare quality of life in Farmers Branch versus the cost of life in Farmers Branch versus that which they may perceive in other communities, there's a pretty good story for us in that. And then lastly, I love the slide with the personnel cost comparison. It says we're being really good stewards of taxpayer dollars when it comes to staffing. And we hear it, with some frequency, too much staff, not the right staff. We hear that a lot. I think this says a lot
Okay. Good.
in our mission to wisely spend tax dollars.
Okay. Good. Good suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the representation of green is perhaps off. It's inverted.
That's
but
true. That's true. I can change that.
Thank you.
Councilman Baird?
Okay. All right. We'll see this again. Thank you for your
Thank you.
suggestions.
Next up is item A3, receive an update on the formation of the Multicultural Task Force.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. Jeff Fairchild, Special Events Manager in the Parks and Recreation Department. Thank you for having me this afternoon. And I just want to take you back just a little bit. In your packets there, you have a little bit of the history of how we got to this point today and the city's desire to create a multicultural event, which will be launched in 2024. And as part of that event, it was the city's desire to ensure that the citizens and residents of this community were able to provide feedback and guidance on how that event should look and feel. There was desire to create a multicultural task force from this community and parts beyond. I was last in front of you in June, just a couple months ago, where we kind of formalized and presented the nuts and bolts, so to speak, of this committee and what it would look and feel like, how it would be made up, and then presented a timeline as to how we would get to that point so that you council could select those task force members. So just bring you back just a little bit to the purpose of this task force, again, just to provide guidance to the city and to staff on this event. These are some of the items that, the components of an event, more or less, that we experience every day in our events that we're doing, but this would include and be tailored toward a multicultural event. The purpose there is, I won't read it verbatim, but you can see the purpose there. The meetings, I think we've had been asked last time, did they have to be during city hours? And we said, of course not. We will, certainly, probably the first one would be, but then we would let the committee decide what works best for them based on schedules and availability. And then, of course, a proposed sunset should we decide in future how we would like to proceed with the task force. So there's kind of the purpose, brief background as there. And then we went into how it would be made up of, the breakdown between staff and residents and non-residents, and a dedicated 3 staff between myself and our special events team, and then up to 12 members of the task force. Doesn't have to be 12, but it's just up to 12. That was the number that we had proposed, and council agreed that was a good number. And then a little more definition as to, well, what are we looking for who would make up this type of committee? And it could be residents, it could be non-residents. And this was just kind of some guidelines that we put in place as to help guide you as to what you're looking for. Also, those that were interested. People that applied for this, they would kind of have an idea of what we were looking for as well. So those were just kind of the numbers there, so to speak, and a little definition of how we were hoping to put this committee together and what it would look and feel like. So then we also presented a timeline. And back in June, we left that meeting with our instructions of how to move forward with the timeline, with lots of help from Stacy and Pete Smith. We were able to get that launched. We had feedback from the council. We put together some additional questions for those applicants that were interested, and that committee the actual application process went live, and we held that for about a month. The applications had since been turned in, and those have been properly vetted, and I believe in your packets tonight, you do have those list of the applicants and of those that were expressed interest. And so this kind of meets our timeline. This was the date that we had proposed, that we would circle back with those names and then allow you as the city council to vet those and present your options. So you've got the names in front of you, you've got the applications, you've got there was an interview process, so all that's in your packet, their answers, their feedback to help you as council decide on your selections. And so we will regroup again in 2 weeks. At that time, council will present their options, again, up to 2. You don't have to pick 2. It's your choice, your discretion. And so that's basically where we're at today. Just to kind of give you a timeline, keeping things moving. You've got the applicants there for your review, and we will see you in 2 weeks with your choices. Any questions?
Any councilman? Questions? Seeing? Yes, sir.
Just some clarifications on sort of how we're appointing members. We don't necessarily have to appoint members within our own district, right?
No, sir.
We can cross over districts.
You can go outside the City of Farmers Branch. Yes, sir.
Okay. I thought that the idea was that the folks applying for membership either lived or worked in Farmers Branch. Is that accurate, or was this just wide open to anyone?
Honestly, it's just non-residents, those that felt that they might have an interest in helping to serve this. They didn't have to necessarily work here. They could have an interest here. They could have grown up
Okay.
here. Just anyone that felt that they might have something to contribute to this process and this type of committee.
Okay.
And I think it's for council to then determine based on their application whether they would be a good fit and what we're looking for.
Okay, that explains the two that didn't appear to live or work here but expressed interest. Okay, all right, very good, thank you.
Anybody else? Very good, thank you. Next up is A4, receive biennial update from the Historical Preservation and Restoration Board.
We have someone who's joining by Zoom.
So we have Councilmember Bennett Burton on Zoom now, and she should pop up. As soon as she activates her camera, she should be able to join the meeting. So,
Thank you. I'll just put your presentation again. Let's see. Is it this one? Yeah. Okay. You just hit the mouse space.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Melissa Dewars, or Missy, for the Historical Park Preservation Board. Here to give you our biannual update. So as always, our mission statement is to collect, preserve, interpret, and celebrate the history of the United States and Texas with an emphasis on Peters Colony and Farmers Branch. Our vision is to provide visitors with high-quality programs, exhibits, and events through living history experiences and mission-based education with a goal of becoming a fully accredited museum that offers programming which will link our past and our future. Our meetings are held on the fourth Thursday of every month, and we welcome anyone, individual who'd like to attend our meeting. Our board member participation is over 80% and growing. Some board accomplishments. We assist the Friends of the Farmers Branch Park with fundraising efforts. Our chair rentals at the Independence Day celebration raised $925, and if we would have had more chairs, we would have sold out those. Our funds are used for various grants for the historical park and applies for, we got a scholarship for $250 to a Farmers Branch residence for the Girls Make History Camp. There was our chair rentals. Our accomplishments at the park so far, we have done a lot of repair and maintenance. The caboose was fully exterior, it doesn't look like that anymore, it's been restored. Our Queen Anne, we had all the porch repairs. The church, stage, and floor repairs with reinforcement, that's still going on. McKee, we had a full exterior restoration. The Event Center update, Event Center groundbreaking ceremony was back in March and construction is underway. Our naming efforts, the community was open in July for a submission of their ideas of naming the center. We received over 500 names. The City Council reviewed community suggestions and Historical Preservation Restoration Board. We had recommendations and the process is going on to complete the selection of the name. We have a lot of activities coming up. We have our Friends of Historical Park meeting. We have that on September 13th. We have our annual meeting, which is September 21st. Kids in Kitchen, Spooky Kooky, October 1st. October 17th, we have our Haunted and Houses trick-or-treating at the Historical Park. October 20th and the 21st, we have the Blooming Grass Festival. Get your tickets now. October 22nd, we have our Branch Art Lives event. And the 28th of October, we have the Halloween in the Park. In November, we have the Day of the Dead celebration. And on the 9th, we have our Tasty Time miniature cake class. On the 12th, we have our photo shoot for our family. So if you know of anybody, it's a great opportunity to take a family portrait out in the park. It looks beautiful in the autumn area. On November 12th, we have the Victorian Fencing Society, which is presenting a grand salute of arms. The 16th of November, we have the Charcuterie Board, which is very popular. Not as popular as our Christmas teas. We were sold out for December 2nd and the 9th already. On the 2nd as well, we have our tree lighting and a celebration of Christmas traditions from around the world exhibits December 2nd, 9th, 16th, and 8th and 15th. Any questions?
Y'all need anything at the park? Everything good?
Everything's good. Just
All
a
right,
need.
perfect.
Thank you.
Councilman Jackson?
Well, it sounds like they need more chairs.
Yes,
Mayor.
we
Yeah,
do.
we
Would
need
love
more chairs.
And so you said if we had more chairs, we
Yeah,
could have rented more
probably rent
chairs.
more. We were done really early.
Yeah, so
We could purchase more
somehow
chairs.
we look into that maybe.
So I guess my
chairs.
question would be, of the money raised, that goes to the general fund, or does that stay with the park?
Stays with the park, it goes with the Friends.
Oh,
Goes in
okay.
the Friends.
Separate
So we would
organization.
have to request a grant to purchase the chairs
From Friends?
from the Friends,
Okay,
which I'm sure they would not.
maybe we should look at doing that.
Okay?
That would probably be a worthwhile investment on their part.
Yes. I agree.
Okay.
So for the first time, Missy, it caught
Yes.
my eye, the goal of becoming a fully accredited museum.
Yes.
Where are we in that process? What does it take? When do we think?
Well, we've done a couple of the steps already, but we're still holding out on a couple more certificates. So it's a long process that we have to go on that Hillary's working on. So I'd have to get back with you and let you know exactly where we are on the progress, but we are working on it.
Okay, yeah,
Yes.
I'm kind of curious.
It is a
Again,
detailed
Yeah,
involvement process that we have to go to.
okay, very good, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, anybody else? Seeing none? Thank you.
All right, thank you guys.
Stick around.
I am.
Okay. Next up is A5, discuss amending the new event center name. So, Lynette, you're up.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Council. Thank you for having me up here to discuss the amendment of the Event Center name. Just as a real, Lynette Hill, Event Center Manager. Just as a real quick recap, just to go through the process that we've done in this labor of love. Our initial process, as was brought out, that the Historical Preservation and Restoration Board proposed the event center names initially with Meadow in it as references. It was refined by a consulting firm to Meadow View. That was presented to council on July the 19th, and then we were asked to go back to the community and do a survey to get additional name suggestions, which we did, and we held that survey from July the 25th through the 31st, and we yielded over 500 suggestions. Two main themes were evident, that those who did submit the suggestions would like to have something that tied geographically and or historically to the name of the event center. couple names were proposed, that included Venue 27 to highlight the 27 acres of the historical park, as well as Venue 1996, which was the year that Farmers Branch was incorporated. At that time, council chose Venue 1842 in honor of Farmers Branch's settlement. So at this point, our next step is that council has asked to have the Venue 1842 name amended, and here we are today. So, discussion.
Thank you. Council, I will open up the floor for new names to be suggested. Councilman Roman.
I don't have anything.
Okay, Councilman Baird.
A resident suggested Founders Hall.
Founders Hall? Okay, there is a Founders Hall already
In the area?
in the area. Councilman Jackson?
So we're asking for, let me back up. We, in the last council meeting, voted Venue 1842. And now we're asking for this name to be amended. Why? Why? Was there a resident request or?
Well, we had two council members requested further discussion or a revisit of this item.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
So, so that's what we're doing. Let me come back to you. Councilwoman Bennett.
Oh.
Can't hear you.
Is on mute?
Can you make sure your microphone is on?
It says it's muted.
There we go.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, speak up.
I apologize. I'm on a plane. We're landing now.
Oh.
Yes, I was wondering what Councilman Jackson asked, because I thought we had agreed on something. But if we have to change it, then Origin 1842 is fine with me. Just keep the 1842 in it.
I'm not sure. I believe she said keep 1842. Is that
Okay.
correct?
So where I stand on this, we went out to residents. We got 500 suggestions. The list shows that there were 16 suggestions that had the word venue in it. And I realize there's a venue somewhere nearby. I don't know that we're going to be able to get away from somebody else thinking of something that we're thinking of today, but along with Councilmember Burton, I like the 1842 because it's unique and specific to Farmers Branch. And, you know, words like farmers and Farmers Branch and heritage and historical and barn and those things aside, because we've already determined that using some of those would create some replication on invitations and that kind of thing. Completely understand that and agree with it. I feel like if we stick with Venue 1842, that we're minding our branding preference, right? Because again, it's unique to Farmers Branch, but we're considering the 500 suggestions that came in from residents. And I think in naming facilities in our city, it's important to engage residents, albeit some of the suggestions are quite ridiculous. 16 times, someone said venue as part of a name. And so I feel like if we keep the word venue, and 1842 was mentioned in here a few times. In fact, there were some dates and address numbers. I feel like we are taking our residents' input into consideration in the naming of the center. And so all that to say, for lack of anything better, I really like Venue 1842, but what I like more about it is it wasn't my idea or any of our ideas necessarily. It came from our residents, and I'm reminded that that's why we're here, is to represent them, and not necessarily my own particular opinion. Thank you.
Fair enough. Councilman Merritt.
Well, your memory and my memory are a little bit different. I read the 500, reviews, or excuse me, submissions, and some of them were silly, as you've already pointed out. But I believe the council came up with 1842 and not specifically resident selection. I agree with you that it's present, so it's amalgamation thereof, but it wasn't a singular entry.
No.
So I think we need to be clear, in my mind, that the council, we had two opportunities and it's already put up there.
It is a single entry. Right there.
I apologize.
Yeah, me too. I missed it. I even marked it off. It is a single entry.
And I think that came from the historical park group as they were looking over that. So we have to remember, as Missy stood up before us and told us that they reviewed all of these names and they worked up the venue 27 and the venue 1942. So
Right.
those are where those,
Right.
primarily came from. I think we kind of have to move on. We could sit here all day and, belabor whether it's the barn. It's going to have a name, that needs to be formal and in the marketplace for event planning and the wedding industry, et cetera, et cetera. But I think once we're out there and you look over, I think it's going to have a casual name that we'll end up calling it. I just think that's what's going to happen.
The barn.
The barn. That's my personal opinion.
I don't disagree with that.
Whether it happens or not, but I think that's where I'm at. And so I don't see making any modifications to the name, personally.
Thank you. I did have one that was submitted to me called The Settlement. I did look to see if The Settlement showed on a Google search, and there were a number of other things attached to that, but nothing thesettlement.com. So, again, we do need to provide closure on this immediately and get on with the task at hand, which is marketing this. Informally, I think this will always be known as the barn to us in Farmers Branch. Okay, that's a given. But a formal name, whether it's Venue 1842 or something else, I'll just say, since other names weren't thrown out, does anybody want to discuss the settlement? Seeing none. Okay. Does anybody want to discuss anything other than Venue 1842?
I just had a resident texted in Heritage Hall 1842.
I think that it's already in here. Yeah.
Since that was on the original list and not considered at that time, I would say, is it your desire to move forward with Venue 1842?
Yes.
Since we are not taking action, I'm asking if just your opinion.
Well, there's,
My preference.
Preference,
That's fine.
preference.
it's on the agenda for tonight.
That's later. We can't do that here.
Understood,
Isn't that the
but
name that you used last time?
yes, it is. So
So
if
you
it,
won't need to.
We'll just pull it.
right, that's what I was making,
Right.
It's been voted on, so.
right.
Are you good? All right, thank you.
Would you,
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilwoman, I forgot that you're up there.
I'm good.
okay.
Nope, we're good.
Okay, very good, thank you. So with that, Which item is that?
5.
We're going to
Strike
remove.
Proceeding action stays.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Next up is A6, discuss future agenda items. Councilman Merritt?
I have nothing new to add, but I think we have talked a couple of times, Mayor, about perhaps, I think the verbiage is maybe cleaning this up and removing some things. The 2 items that I have on the current list, I think could be removed.
Let me get to that.
Sure. I don't know if it's,
Okay.
so I've had I'd had information provided to me regarding the street and sign improvements, signal improvements on Garden Brook and Marsh, and then the request at Tanglewood and Marsh addressed, as well as the update on the knowledge management information system that's been provided. So I'm comfortable with removing those from under review. And I think there's been other comments by other council folks as well that some of this might be able to be removed.
So since the first topic you mentioned was shared with Councilman Roman, were you good with removing that?
Mine was vehicle congestion, speeding in neighborhoods.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
it was
it's a
all,
separate-
okay.
that's
I
a
saw it all in
separate-
here together. Okay,
It is
we'll
similar.
remove your part and leave yours. Okay.
And then I will just go back, Mayor, we shared information through email related to some possible suggestions about creating some more thought. And we can revisit that going forward. But those are my 2 comments.
I would love to visit with you individually on that, sort of waiting till we got past the budget for
Totally fine.
all this other stuff.
I
Okay,
had not heard that scheduling, but that's perfectly fine.
okay.
I think, Mayor, just what Council Merritt was saying on particularly my item, single-family long-term rentals over 30 days. If there was a little bit more indication what that means, I think we were talking about going back and making sure that all of our long-term rental permits are up to date, if I recall that suggestion correctly. But to Councilman Merritt's point, I'm not 100% sure. So a few more details in there would be helpful.
What we'll start adding is the intent of the discussion and why it's being added, not just the
Perfect.
subject matter. This one was a sticky one because we talked a little bit about it when we did short-term rentals and the correlation to long-term rentals. And so it grew from there. And so
Okay.
we're looking to check these boxes as
Yeah.
well and get these off the list.
Okay.
Okay.
That's all. Thank you,
All right.
Mayor.
Councilman Barrett?
I had a resident present a good idea, I think. In the same way that we have the citizens on patrol doing a code enforcement on patrol, where we might have a couple of residents pair up on the weekends and traverse the city and make some reports to our code enforcement
Okay,
division.
we can certainly have that discussion. Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. Councilwoman? Is she still there?
Mayor, I think she's deboarded.
I'm here. I'm good. I'm just,
She
because
said
we're in
she's
the
good.
airport, I'm having to go in and out.
Okay,
Oh, well, she turned off her camera, so.
okay. Well, thank you. Councilman Rowan?
Nothing for me.
All right, very good. That's. So that concludes A6. Moving on to executive session, we do have 3 items, so let me read into executive session, please. Item B1, council may convene into closed executive session pursuant to Section 551.087 of the Texas Government Code to discuss economic development incentives for Project Navy. Item B2, council may convene into closed executive session pursuant to Section 551.072 of the Texas Government Code to discuss the purchase, exchange, lease, or sale of real property located south of Valley View Lane, east of Highway 35, north of Farmers Branch Lane, and west of Tom Field Road. And item B3, council may convene into closed executive session pursuant to Section 551.071, subparagraph 2 of the Texas Government Code, consultation with city attorney regarding the agreements between the city and Farmers Branch Community Theater, Inc. for use of the city's property at 2535 Valley View Lane. We'll take a 5-minute recess
We get dinner and bring it in, or wait?
if it's here.